What happens at Babel is God says, look, I'm done. I am done with you people, but you're still my imagers, and so I'm going to assign you to lesser Elohim of my counsel. This is why I refer to the Tower of Babel as the Romans 1 event.
I made a video of John Lennox explaining the Tower of Babel, and I was recommended to watch Dr. Michael Heiser's video on the Tower of Babel. So let's get right into it, guys. This is absolutely fascinating and super interesting. Let's get into it.
We've had a fall in Genesis 3. We've had a second rebellion in Genesis 6 that was so bad, that permeated humanity so deeply that God sends a flood. After the flood, Noah and his sons emerge from the ark, and God says to them, okay, we're going to try again. God repeats the original Edenic mandate to go forth, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. There's a reference in Genesis 9 to humanity still bearing the image of God. You're still my imagers. I want you to go out and do the original job of Eden. We're going to start over again. So do that. Spread out, populate, and spread my goodness, the knowledge of me throughout the world, and this is what I want done. So what do? They congregate at Babel.
You're telling me that was another act of rebellion. By them, instead of spreading out, they congregate. That's another simple thing that I didn't think about.
Had enough. This is why I refer to the Tower of Babel as the Romans 1 event of the Old Testament. If you read Romans 1, it talks about God giving humanity up to their sin. Just, okay, this is the way you want to live? Have at it. We'll see how that goes. God has had enough at Babel. He divorces humanity. He disinherits them from being in his family. He cuts them off. He abandons them. He's angry. Now, we know it's not permanent because what he does next tells us that. God divorces humanity and says, okay, you don't want me to be your God. I'm still interested in you because you are my imagers. So I'm going to allot you. This is the language of Deuteronomy 4. Let's just go to Deuteronomy 4. This is the parallel to Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9, Deuteronomy 4, 19, 20, where Moses is warning the people against worshiping the sun, moon, and stars, the host of heaven. Don't bow down unto them and serve them, things that the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven. But the Lord has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be a people of his own inheritance, as you are this day. You see the similarity in the language, the words for allotment, the words for inheritance. Okay, you go to Deuteronomy 17. We find out that this host of heaven they're actually gods. They're actually Elohim. Again, people are getting blamed. They've gone and served other gods and worshiped them, the sun, moon, or any of the host of heaven, which I have forbidden. They've served other, right here, let's open up our interlinear, other Elohim.
Wow.
It's not just astral stuff. Okay, this is the way other gods are described. You go to Deuteronomy 29. Again, this is all in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is actually good for something. It's good for a lot, but here we go. So this is talking about, hey, if Israel ever gets kicked on land, people are going to say, what happened? Verse 24, all the nations will say, why has the Lord done thus to his land? What caused the heat of his great anger? Why is he so mad? Then the people will say, it is because they abandoned the covenant of the Lord, the God of their fathers, which he made with them when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. And they went and served other gods and worshiped them, gods whom they had not known and whom he had not allotted to them. Okay, this is a whole system of theology. What happens at Babel is God says, look, I'm done. I am done with you people, but you're still my imagers, and so I'm going to assign you to lesser Elohim of my counsel, and I'm going to assign them to you. Deuteronomy 4, Deuteronomy 32, it's two sides of the same coin. And what I want is they're going to be sort of placeholders. I want them to rule you, nations, even though it's not going to be me. I'm out of the picture here. You're getting stepdads now.
Wait a minute. So he's saying because of the people were so wicked, he allowed them to worship other gods. Are these literal spiritual beings? Am I completely missing this? Comment down in the chat what you guys think.
But I still want you people to be ruled according to my good character, my justice, my righteousness. You say, well, that wasn't in any of those verses. You're correct, it wasn't. But if you go to Psalm 82, where these gods are being judged by God in a divine council meeting, and God is really angry there, he actually sentences these other gods to death. I said, verse 6, Psalm 82:6, I said to all of you, you are Elohim, all of you. The pronouns plural too. You're all Elohim, you're all sons of the Most High, but you're going to die like men. Why are they being judged? Verses 2 through 5. For injustice, corruption, for sowing chaos in their nations. And also, if you go back to Deuteronomy 32, they accept worship. They encourage idolatry, which was a problem that began with Genesis 6.
No way. So these, I'm assuming he's saying spiritual beings were accepting worship. My mind is getting blown. Like, I've heard of the Council of the Gods before and whatever that can mean. Like, that could just be spiritual beings, like the type of angel or something like that. I don't know. This is crazy.
Okay, we're back there again. So they do a miserable job. And this is a judgment. This is a judgment against the world, against humanity. God, wants these people still governed well, because when he calls Abraham and makes Israel his own inheritance, when he makes a covenant with Abraham in Genesis 12, what does he say to Abraham? It's through your seed that all of these nations are ultimately going to be blessed. God still has the nations on his brain, as it were. But right now, his relationship is with Israel. It will be through Israel that the Messiah is raised up, that will bring all of this full circle and bring the nations back into the fold. This is why we have Paul. Okay, this is why we have an apostle to the Gentiles.
Yeah.
Now, if you were a member of one of these other nations, you could join Israel in the Old Testament. Rahab did it. Okay, I mean, we had others that joined the nation. They forsook other gods and came into the fold. But it didn't happen en masse. They were mired in idolatry and wickedness. So Israel, this is why Israel has to be set off and set apart. They are to be a conduit of blessing and an example of blessing to the other nations, so that the lights would go on and they would say, man, what makes these people so different? They're prosperous, they're happy. They got some strange beliefs, like they don't have idols and they pray to some invisible God. But I mean, what's up with that? And it was a means by which to have those conversations and bring people back into the fold. Now, ultimately, what's going to accelerate that is the coming of the Messiah, God as man.
Yep. An amazing lesson for all of us to not put things before God. Still today, people have idols. People put things more important than God, and that is sadly the downfall of mankind.
But in the Old Testament, what this does is creates a worldview circumstance, and this is it. Right after Babel and the call of Abraham, that sets the stage for the rest of the Old Testament. This is why it's Israel against the nations, and the nations against Israel. And it's why it's Yahweh against the gods, and the gods against Yahweh. This is why in the Old Testament we have the concept of cosmic geography, go to another level. There's this sense, well, if this is the way it is, then I can only be rightly related to the real God, the true God, Yahweh, if I'm in his land. So when I'm outside the land, that's dangerous. It's dangerous territory because it's under dominion of some other God. They even have this sense of going out into the wilderness, like when they're journeying after the Exodus, when they're journeying to the promised land and the presence of God, like it was in Eden, now it's with the tabernacle, with the Ark of the Covenant. If you ventured outside the camp into the wilderness, that was the place where demons were. We have Leviticus 17. They were out there sacrificing to demons, like to placate them and keep them at bay. And God, don't do this. You're missing the point, dude. They have to correct this. And part of the corrective is the Day of Atonement, Leviticus 16.
I did not realize that, according to him, he's saying that a lot of worship was to actual spiritual beings. I'm sorry if I'm completely missing it. I don't know, but I feel like God also talks about how these golden images, they can't do anything. Stone and wood and carved, gold, whatever. There's nothing to them. But there could be some spiritual forces.
But you had this sense that to be outside of God's camp is to be in a place that is hostile to God's people. It's the place where Azazel, the Satan figure of the Old Testament, that's where he is.
Dang. It's
why the desert places in the prophets are described with weird, crazy animals that get identified with demons. It's why you get this sense that this place is under dominion. And this worldview that emerges from Deuteronomy 32 is reflected in a number of passages. Naaman, when Naaman comes to Israel to speak with the prophet to be cured of leprosy, and he is cured, and he says, now I know that Yahweh is the God of all gods, and I will never worship another. What does he ask the prophet for on his trip back home? He's not staying in Israel. He's never going to read Torah. He's never going to observe the Sabbath. He's not going to get circumcised.
Yeah.
Okay? But his theology consists of one point that is the ultimate point. Who is the true God? So what does he ask the prophet for? Dirt. Can I take some dirt back? Load up my caravan with dirt. And, Elisha says, yeah, good, fine, go ahead. Take all you can carry. And we're not told what he's going to do with it, but he actually explains.
I had no idea that he was going to Naaman took dirt from getting cured from leprosy. Should I look that up? 2 Kings 5:17 says, then Naaman said, if not, please let there be given to your servant 2 mule loads of earth. For from now on, your servant will not offer burnt offering on sacrifice to any god but the Lord. I'm learning something every day.
Part of my job is I gotta take the king. I'm a big captain and I'm the commander-in-chief in Syria. And I got to take the king into the temple of Ramon sometimes, and the king's kind of old, and when he bows, I got to hold him up, and I'm kind of bowing with him, but I want you to know that I'm not worshiping Ramon. So I don't know if he took dirt with him, as a protective thing, I need the turf of the God of Israel with me, or if he just used it as his house to build an altar on, to worship Yahweh. We don't know. But the one thing we do know is that he ain't worshiping any other God. And Elisha says, good.
Good.
That's good theology. It also shows faith. It shows belief. It's believing loyalty. We know where Naaman's at now. You get it, with David when he's kicked out of Judah and he's lamenting, how am I going to pray to the Lord now? It's David's not denying God's omnipresence. He has a sense that to be related to God, he has to be in Israel because the other nations are under dominion. Okay, we've got the episode with the Ark of the Covenant when the Philistines take it. They take it to the temple of Dagon, which is comical. It's funny. The next day, Dagon's just a stump. His head's lopped off, his arms, his limbs, he's just laying there. But we miss, in 1 Samuel 5, this is 1 Samuel 4 and 5, but in 1 Samuel 5, we miss the part that says, to this day, the priests of Dagon refused to walk over the threshold where they found Dagon. Why? Because Yahweh has taken dominion of that turf. This is where Dagon was defeated.
Wow.
That little patch of ground, we're not taking any chances. We're walking around it. Because now it is under the dominion of Yahweh. This is cosmic geography. It plays out in all sorts of passages. When we get to the New Testament, you're going to have the same ideas play out there too, but it all extends from Deuteronomy 32. Again, Deuteronomy 32 worldview. Like Pentecost, again, just to foreshadow in the last few minutes here, where we're going with this. Again, if you've read Unseen Realm, you know exactly where this is going to go. If you haven't, this is going to be news. But
I haven't.
there's a reason why the nations at Pentecost, you have Jews from all over the world. They've been scattered all over the world in exile. They come to Jerusalem to celebrate the feast at Pentecost. They witness people able to speak in their own languages supernaturally because of the arrival of the Holy Spirit. And the message is about this Jesus of Nazareth guy who was put on a cross and then he rose from the dead and he's the Messiah. And they believe. And then they take that message back home, back to their countries. Well, we actually get a list of those countries, and they proceed from east to west. They cover the territory from the Jews in exile in the east all the way through, not just where the Jews are, where they're living because of the captivities and the exiles, but it also picks off a number of the nations that are listed in the table of nations. It actually covers all of the regions except for one, that's Tarshish. Okay, and Paul covers that in his pursuit to get to Spain, because Spain was Tarshish. Again, we're going to cover all this later.
Wow.
But if you keep reading through the book of Acts, we have other places. Why does the Spirit of God take Philip and just supernaturally transport him from where he was to Azotus? Azotus is Philistine territory. Okay, why do we have the episode with the Ethiopian eunuch? The guy from Ethiopia that Philip, again, in the chariot, he witnesses to him and the guy becomes a believer. Okay, because that's territory that a Jewish settlement had been in the Old Testament. And that's Acts chapter 8. You have all of the Jewish territories covered first, and then you start picking off Samaria and Azotus and these Gentile territories, to the Jew first, then also to the Gentile. Okay, this is a pattern. It's a pattern the purpose of it is to announce that Jesus the Messiah was not just the Messiah of Israel and of the Jew. He is the Messiah of the entire world. He wants every nation to come back into the fold. And the business of the gospel is to get believers in all of the nations, extract them into God's family. And Paul, eventually, the last thing he wants to do before he dies is get to Spain, which is Tarshish, which is the last spot, the last region in the table of nations that has not been covered by the gospel.
That's crazy. So he's correlating the Tower of Babel is of God allowing other gods to be worshipped, essentially. He handed them over to their devices until finally Jesus redeeming the Gentiles into saving and bringing back the Redeemer to all of mankind. That was a very interesting explanation. So shout out to Dr. Michael Heiser. That's super interesting. I'd love to know what you guys think in the comments down below. Fascinating stuff. And if you've never decided to follow Jesus, I encourage you to do that today. In the description below, you will be able to click a link to help you to decide to follow Jesus for the first time. Do that today, guys. It will be the best decision you could ever make.